if you, like me, are actually excited for Assassin's Creed Shadows and excited for Yasuke, here's the one video on the internet that will talk about it. It's so sad. If you just Google or YouTube Yasuke Assassin's Creed Shadows, all you're going to get is just a couple of Ubisoft trailers and then pure misery. So I just want to put my positive thoughts out there because I'm really excited. I'm going to be playing Shadows nonstop when it comes out and I can't wait. I mean, I'm wearing this. I have Mad Assassin's Creed back there. I am a huge fan and no amount of internet hate is going to change that. You know what? Let's talk about why they don't like Yasuke, because it isn't any number of reasons. I know people will be like, oh, they're all racist. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of people on a lot of different sides of a lot of different things that are all upset about different things and all seem like they're on the same side of hating Assassin's Creed and Ubisoft. So I wouldn't put them all in one box, okay? So things people don't like about Yasuke right off the bat, and we'll go through and say why those things don't bother me, or I actually have the very opposite opinion. He's not native to Japan, obviously. He's not a Japanese man. I don't know if you could tell. It's debated as to whether he's actually a samurai. It's open to debate. Historians have come out and said, no, there's no way. It's all in question. Nonetheless, he's a historical... I'm not gonna argue with it yet. We're going through the list. People also don't like how Ubisoft has handled responding to the criticism that Yasuke isn't a samurai. He's not an assassin and doesn't appear to have the usual gameplay of one that we're used to for the Assassin's Creed series. And people notably say throughout the series that, oh, it's changed too much, blah, 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 which is confusing when they also say, oh, it's so repetitive and the games are all the same. So you can't have both. I will never understand the arguments there, but nonetheless, the fifth one is that I don't know if you knew he's also black. So put all of these things together and there's different types of hate. There's different types of real valid opinions. There's different types of people who just misunderstand what's going on. So I'm going to break down why none of these things bother me. Not only do they not bother me, I think all of these things are exciting. I'm serious. I'm not baiting you. Here's why. So Yasuke is actually the first ever in the Assassin's Creed series historical playable character. He was real. Whether or not he was a samurai, he was real. And that's really freaking cool. We've not had that yet. We've met historical figures. We've killed Julius Caesar. We've threatened Cleopatra. We got to hang out with both of them before we did those things and help them rise to power. We had Alexander Graham Bell fix our grappling thing in Syndicate. We spanked the Pope. I mean, I did. I don't know if you did.
You are right to fear me.
Say it again! Say it again, you little... You have to battle the Pope. I happen to spank him. So we've met some historical figures throughout the time, but we've never gotten to play as one. So this is going to be cool. And I'll get into why that seems to be in this game versus how we've never had that before. Like why that's happened in this game. So I'm just excited that we get to play as a historical figure. Like this was imagine being a real person and you get to be put in a video game and have the part of your life that no one knows because you're a blank slate just be written as like a cool assassin. Well, he's not an assassin, but written into an Assassin's Creed game where you just get to like forever exist in the game. Like I don't know how long this era of technology will last, but it's certainly outlasting the influence he had in his life before that. He's been in pieces of media before. I think there's a Netflix something about him. He's been in other games before, like mentions of him. So this is not the first time Yasuke's been mentioned as a samurai in a video game. I think Rise of Ronin did it. So I think it's cool. I just think it's cool we get to play as a real person, especially a real maybe samurai. That's good enough for me. I'm not asking for his birth certificate, okay? Now, here's where it starts to get really interesting past that. I'm also really excited because he's a foil for both the Assassins and Japan. If you don't know what a foil is, it's basically a contrasting character that can show you things. It's like holding up a mirror to the things that you're used to in order to show you those things better. So when we're looking at the Assassins, we've mostly been from the assassin perspective. Now we've had things like Cassandra, who was pre-assassins. They were against the cultists, future Templars, but she never labeled herself as an assassin. Even when she meets the assassins, I believe she mentioned something about like not quite being fully on their side at all times.
My friends and I are trying to keep it out of the hands of the Templar Order. Listen to me. Order, chaos. If either triumphs alone, the world dies. I tried to bring an end to chaos, and it has only led to ruin.
which I relate to be honest. I relate to Cassandra and Edward probably the most. I don't really like the culty assassins as much. I wouldn't want to be a part of them. So I understand that perspective. I think we do need more foil to the assassins in general. I don't think Shay and Rogue was quite right for that. I wish they'd taken it kind of a slightly different direction. It felt like all of the assassins were out of character there. But we've seen how the assassins, when they rise to full power, can be they can get out of hand as well. So seeing a foil for that, seeing a foil for some of those things that we've just come to accept that maybe we shouldn't and maybe we should question, could be a really good thing. We've seen things like him trying to balance on a rope and then falling. We've seen him try to take a leap of faith and not. It was a leap of faith. But like it'll shift the way that we see the things that have been very normal and natural. And some people are complaining and saying, he's saying, this is not my Assassin's Creed. They're missing the point of seeing their Assassin's Creed through a contrasting lens and getting to appreciate those details even more. Because you don't have to play as him. You could play it as him a little bit and get that like mirror held up to Naoi and to the assassins and point out those details, and then play as the character and the culture that you know and love in the assassins, if that's what you so choose. So just giving that option, I think, is really neat and will offer a layer that we haven't really had in the series before to this extent and in this way. The closest might even have been Eivor, who was kind of adjacent to the assassins and was also Isu reincarnated. So I think that's the closest, but this is obviously going to be different from that. So this is a new type of story that will hold up a new lens to this whole overarching lore that we have been seeing for years and years. The only time we really had dual protagonists otherwise was actually, we've had two in Origins a little bit, but when we had dual protagonists in, say, Syndicate, they might have differed on kind of what they wanted, but they were overall on the same side. Whereas we don't know if we're always going to be on the same side with these two characters. So there could be real conflict here, especially if he's not in with the assassins. So there's a lot of opportunity to tell a different type of story here. And that's the main reason, honestly, that I'm excited for him. But there's a few others as well. For instance, a foil for Japanese culture. So a lot of the games we go in, I thought it was actually the first game that does this, but it's not. Very interesting tie here. In a lot of stories, you'll notice that you are like the new kid at school, or you're like a person moving to a new culture and place. Because then they can lead you as the audience into the moment and introduce new elements in a pacing that makes sense logically for the story and logically for the viewer. Now, Assassin's Creed rarely does that. The most we've seen it is in the modern day, actually, because we see Desmond being taught a lot about Abstergo. We see us being taught a lot about Abstergo after that. So there's a lot of these different elements of us being brought into new territory in the modern day. That almost never happens in actual Assassin's Creed because we are a native of those cultures almost always, right? But when it did happen, technically we were a conqueror in Valhalla, so we did move there, but we were a conqueror, so we were also part of creating that culture and taking over those who were already there so that we could have our culture there. And set up our culture there. So we were kind of more in control there. In Assassin's Creed 3, we were kind of outside of the culture a little bit and we were being conquered. So we were kind of the culture, but there was a culture clash. You also have Black Flag, where he's going about and pirating the Caribbean. So a little bit where they're taking over, but again, creating the culture. The only time that we've had someone go into an established culture and learn about it was, Assassin's Creed Revelations, which is the end of Ezio's story. So we'd already had this established character in our minds. So we'd known him, and then we were going into this new place, and they established it from there. So that'll be the most similar. I thought it was the first one that did that, and then I thought on them all, and I was like, Revelations did it. So that'll be the most similar to coming into kind of a new culture. But what's cool here is that there's so much opportunity for us to learn about Japan in this way, because while it's really cool to play as a native to the culture, we have that in the other character. So we have one that's native to the culture and one that's not, which will allow us a lot more opportunity to learn about the culture itself from an inside perspective and an outside perspective. That foil will serve to help us learn it even better than we would from either perspective. So I'm excited for that because I know a lot of people have wanted to learn about Japanese culture and have wanted the feudal Japan setting. So I think that's going to really elevate it for those who are excited about learning about the culture, because you have both of these differing and contrasting perspectives. It should be even better. Now, let's talk a little bit about how Ubisoft is handling it. Now, I'm going to kind of combine here. People don't like how Ubisoft has handled it, and he's black. Let me kind of combine those two together. So how Ubisoft is handling it, they didn't take the easy route of just using and having a Japanese male protagonist. That would have been the obvious answer. Now, would haters of Ubisoft found something else to complain about? Yes, absolutely, yes. He's a scapegoat for their hate. They're just glomming onto it because it's an easy win for them to just hate. They would be hating no matter what, I promise you. There are so many voices on the internet right now that just want to hate, again, for multiple different reasons. They're not all in the same camp, but it's just a hate-filled area right now. And so if you like something, just hold on to that. Find your people that also like that. That's why I post some of these. That's why I post things on my Twitter as well, because I want to meet the people who like the things that I like. I meet a lot of those people on stream if you want to join us as well. I get that there's just people that hate it no matter what. Now, they could have taken the easy route still and made it a less easy hate target. So why didn't they? Feudal Japan is the most requested era that Assassin's Creed has ever done. People have wanted this one forever, and there's probably a lot of reasons for that we don't necessarily need to go into. The only closest would be the pirate era, where there are a lot of games in that era too, but Black Flag did it best at the time, and really just, I don't think anything has really topped that. For some, Sea of Thieves might, just because it's a different type of game. But Assassin's Creed Black Flag did such a good job with the pirate era. We've had some other good media of it, but game-wise, that one does a really good job. And so, sure, they could have tried to go that route with feudal Japan. They could have just chosen kind of the easy route here. But this isn't the first game of its kind, whereas Black Flag was. There's nothing out there still like Black Flag. Even the pirate games that compete are distinct in some way. Now, we know there's an obvious competitor here, which is Ghost of Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima, a lot of people say it's like, oh, it's better Assassin's Creed. Now, I was not a huge fan of Ghost of Tsushima, though it has its advantages. 100% it leaned into parts that Ubisoft has not of this type of game. So it would be very easy for people to do a one-to-one comparison without any sort of hook for Ubisoft's version of feudal Japan. It would be Japanese male protagonist versus Japanese male protagonist, and there would be a lot of difficulty in them feeling distinct from Ghost of Tsushima if they did just that. So they obviously looked for opportunities to differentiate themselves. Wouldn't you want to diversify out a little bit from your competition in some notable way? So they have a female protagonist and they have a black protagonist and a not Japanese male protagonist. Now, let's talk about both of those and break down why people are upset, and again, why I'm not. So some would say, okay, well, they should have a Japanese protagonist anyway, and they do have a woman. But there are some gamers who say, oh, it's a woman? No, I wanted a Japanese man. I don't really have an answer to that. I'm going to try my best to leave my bias on the table for a second, because obviously so a female Japanese protagonist may scream DEI to a lot of people who scream DEI. And I've had a lot of in-depth conversations about DEI with my friend Dayla on our Unfiltered Gamers podcast, where we break these things down and try to just have an open dialogue about it, coming from different perspectives quite often, where you would be surprised by some of the things that I say, because I don't necessarily approve of when identity is used to sell something. I do think that that's where, yes, I believe that there is some DEI issues. And I do think that it comes from people who are giving money from the top and paid them to insert things into games. I do think that these things exist. And I do think that there's race swapping that's a problem. I do think that there's gender swapping that's a problem. So if we are putting my biases kind of out of this a little bit, and you kind of understand where I'm coming from, I also get really excited when there's a woman in a game, because I'm a woman who plays games. So I like being included, but I don't want to be used as a pawn either to sell something. So there's a right way to go about it. And there are a lot of gamers on the internet who will scream DEI even when things make sense. So they see a non-Japanese male protagonist and they say, okay, DEI. But they're also saying DEI about the female, which doesn't make any sense because there have been females throughout the Assassin's Creed series throughout the whole series. So that's just silly, right? It's not being forced. And I also don't think Yasuke is forced, and we'll get into that in just a second. But to finish up the female protagonist thing, Ubisoft's been hesitant to commit to having females on the marketing material for all of Assassin's Creed history. Even I actually have a tweet, and I'll put it on the screen, where I was responded to by the voice actress for Aya. And she had tweeted that it was a totally different story from the beginning. And so there's a lot of theories out here where Aya's point of view was the main point of view in Origins originally. But Ubisoft was always afraid to commit to having a woman at the front of a game because of these guys who, for some reason, would rather stare at a man for hundreds of hours because it's less threatening to their masculinity. And she clearly had a big role. She was the one to threaten Cleopatra and kill Julius Caesar. Okay, that's part of. So anyway, as much as I liked Bayek, women have always been a part of Assassin's Creed. So it's not inserted here for DEI, okay? It's just telling a good story and knowing that women are half the population. Surprise. Now, as for Yasuke being black, that could come as like are they doing this to try to push an agenda? They'll say, right? Again, could be a valid argument depending on the game. I don't think it is in this one, and this could just be my bias for Assassin's Creed, so feel free to dissect it how you want, but this is why it doesn't bother me personally. Maybe I'm justifying, but here's how I justify. Put together wanting to differentiate, put together finding an opportunity for a real historical figure to be in the game. So they're looking around for some way to differentiate from Ghost of Tsushima and the myriad of other games that have been in feudal Japan. That's just the most similar. There are so many games that have been in feudal Japan. This is a competitive era in gaming. So they're differentiating. They find a historical figure that not only might be a real samurai, but also has a blank slate for half his history. I found this in an article by CBR, an interview with the Assassin's Creed Shadows producer. And he says, when we started settling on the unification of Japan, a lot of the story revolves around Oda Nobunaga. I'm going to just absolutely destroy all of the names in this game. When you start looking into the story of Oda, you find out about Yasuke. And you start getting interested, how is this person, this outsider, this foreigner, coming into the service of one of the most powerful people in Japan, if not the most powerful? And there's information, but it's very limited. So you have this enigmatic, mysterious person. And so for us, it's a great canvas to write a story. That's all the justification I need. I just want them to tell a good story, and I want it to be fun. I don't particularly care about anything else. Blank slate, historical figure, differentiated. All of that's great for me and covers up any concept of it being just shoehorned in or an agenda. Now, you may say, okay, but we should have more Japanese males in media. We should, but maybe not just as samurais. There have been a lot of Japanese male samurais. It's at this point extremely stereotypical for them. So maybe we could have them in other media too, where it fits and isn't DEI shoehorned in, and everyone's happy except the people who are going to be racist no matter what. But that's, again, not every group, because I know people will come out and be like, that's the word that's thrown around every time you disagree. No, I'm not. You're not all. Some of y'all, not all of you. Okay, I get it. You're tired of being called theisms. I'm not calling you that just because you don't like Yasuke. I am throwing out where my thoughts are and why it doesn't bother me. Now, here's one where I'm going to get real deep into some cultural thoughts and ideas that are definitely going to upset some people. However, it's an opportunity for a different type of story that aligns really well with the Assassin story, which is a slavery to freedom story. And this would not be the first time that Assassin's Creed has told this type of story. Except here, it will be throughout one game as the main character. The other time we've seen this, it was in Black Flag and Rogue, and the spin-off DLC game, Freedom Cry, where he was the main playable character. He wasn't a real person like this, but he was in 3 different games. And how many people do we know in 3 different games in Assassin's Creed? Pretty much Ezio, maybe Cassandra. I think Cassandra. at this point, though the mobile game hasn't come out yet, and we'll see what other ones she might be in. I think the max for anybody else was 2, and maybe the DLC doesn't count as a game. So nonetheless, it doesn't happen often. But it was clearly that important to Ubisoft to put in. And again, because I think it aligns really well. And he even says that when he converts to being an assassin. He has a conversation with Edward, and it fits well for him and his journey and the things that he values. Slavery to freedom is a great parallel to the Assassin's Creed love for freedom and fight for freedom. And how many gaming stories can you name that have slaves finding their footing? Freed slaves finding their footing. That's not a common story. And the thing about gaming is it's an interactive medium for which we can have stories, something communicated. There's a lot that can go on here that we can't just have in writing. This has not been covered in this medium barely at all. And not just finding their footing, but this historical figure finds some level of prominence. Adewale, that was his name. I don't think I mentioned it yet. Adewale was the original character that this kind of happened for. Now, the thing about Assassin's Creed is it's literally global. It's throughout multiple periods of history in multiple different areas. So if you hate DEI and like completely, like you hate diversity and equity and inclusion, you're gonna have a hard time with Assassin's Creed. And that's where there's a lot of that like hate incoming that does feel often like an ism. But again, I've told you that I have a nuanced perspective on how this can be like an actual agenda or a conspiracy, or like the money flowing and they'll pay for you having those things in your games. Like that does exist. I do fully believe it exists. However, even if Ubisoft accepted money for this, it wouldn't matter because it fits and aligns with their value system and the stories they're telling anyway. That would just be a bonus for Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed because it's in the material. It's inherent in the material anyway. It's a global series all over history, all races, all ethnicities, all genders, sexualities, whatever you want to throw in there. Throw in a thing. Assassin's Creed is going to cover it. It's part of the framework of the series since day one. First game was in the Holy Land, for goodness sakes. So by definition, it's diverse. As we travel through history, learning about an endless variety of humans and their stories. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, people will say, oh, he's not a real samurai, and Ubisoft keeps saying he is. And here's the thing. The series was never, we have always had perfectly accurate historical information. Here's our museum. Come look at our perfect facts. It's history is our playground. They use it as a structure, a framework, details, things to build on, things to make a fun playground out of. That's it. It's never been fully accurate. Everything. They just try to have a lot of accuracy in the things that they're bringing to the table so that you can learn while you are playing. But fun, playground is first. History is our playground. Not playground is our history. History is our playground. We're playing first. Playing is the thing that we're doing. They're not going to make it boring just so it's factual. That's why I can spank the Pope. Say it again! Say it again, you little... So I'm excited for Yasuke. Most days it feels like I'm the only one on the internet. Maybe the world. But he could be part of one of the most unique chapters of the series yet. And I don't know what's going to happen to this game, if it'll be successful, if Ubisoft will stay afloat. But I will play this series regardless. I might need physical copies for that. Depending on which way this goes. But I love this series. You can't take that away from me. I'm sorry. You can't take the love. You can hate all you want, but my love for this series will still be there. I'm excited for Yasuke. For those of you who are too, please let me know. Have conversations anywhere with me about it because I'm hyped. And those of you who aren't, there are plenty of people that you can resonate with elsewhere. You won't resonate with me. So, Assassin's Creed fans, gamers, I'm MADkurious. And I will see you playing Shadow soon and in the next one.